Okay, hello, welcome. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for this professional development opportunity. I am Christy Blewett, NCEA's facilitator for today's webinar, Exploring Innovative Educator Pipelines Strategies from Recruitment to Retention. A few housekeeping notes before we start. Today's session will be recorded for archival purposes. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A window where all questions will be monitored. At the conclusion of today's session, a link to the online survey will be shared in the chat box with instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for this webinar. Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. Michael T. O'Connor. Michael is the Program Director for Outreach and Professional Development at the Roche Center for Catholic Education at Boston College. He leads professional development efforts, including teacher leadership programming and coaching for school and system leaders, teaches in the Masters of Education Educational Leadership Program, and contributes to research projects. In his role, he draws upon his previous work as a Catholic middle school educator, instructional coach, professional learning consultant, teacher, educator, researcher, and policy maker across Catholic and public educational settings. Previously, he was the coordinator of educator pipelines preparation and certification with the Roche Island Department of Education. He also has experience with multiple programs in the University Consortium for Catholic Education, including as the director of the Providence Alliance for Catholic Teachers at Providence College. Michael earned his doctorate in curriculum and instruction with a specialization in language, literacy, and culture from the Lynch School at Boston College and is a Coyle Research Fellow with the University of Notre Dame Center for Literacy Education. Let us begin our time together in prayer. Please join me in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we ask for your guidance as we gather to address the crucial task of recruiting and retaining dedicated educators and leaders for our Catholic schools. Bless our efforts to build strong, mission-driven pipelines that support and sustain those who answer the call to serve. In unity with the Blessed Mother, may our work today be rooted in wisdom, inspired by faith, and aimed at nurturing the next generation of educators who will carry forward the mission of Catholic education with integrity and love. We entrust our efforts towards heaven, knowing that with grace, our Catholic schools and communities will be strengthened. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dr. Michael T. O'Connor, thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours, or should I say the screen is yours.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks for that wonderful introduction and for leading us in prayer to kick us off. And thank you to NCA for the invitation to lead this webinar with you all today, to Laura McDonald in particular, and again to Christy for hosting as we get started. And thanks. I see a number of folks when I was looking at who was jumping in, a lot of familiar names. So thanks to those who are joining. And to those who I don't yet know, I look forward to getting to know you further in this work or just through other NCA opportunities. So thank you for being here this afternoon or morning if you're joining from the West Coast. As Christy said, the title of this webinar is Exploring Innovative Educator Pipeline Strategies from Recruitment to Retention. Christy did a great job providing an overview of who I am and what my background is. One thing just to name again is that a lot of this work draws from my previous experience actually working for the Rhode Island Department of Education, right? Most of my time in education has been in Catholic education, both as an educator and an instructional coach, and in Catholic higher education, right? Preparing and forming beginning Catholic teachers. But I did do a brief stint in the public sector with the state education agency. And during that time, I was the coordinator of pipelines, educator pipelines, preparation and certification, and learned a great deal about this topic. And when I came back to Catholic education through the Roche Center, I had a real interest in thinking about these questions, specifically in our Catholic education settings and how we could learn from other sectors, especially the public sector, and what that might mean for us as we're thinking about educator pipelines more broadly. I also wanted to note I did a presentation on this topic back at NCEA in Pittsburgh in April. So the presentation has evolved from them, but I wanted to name that I enjoyed the opportunity with NCA to be able to present on this topic back in April, and then to be able to continue it with you here today. So objectives, right? We got to start off with some objectives for our time together. Attendees will explore the concept of educator pipelines, particularly recruitment and retention, through innovative research and examples of practice. You all will use a diagnostics tool to reflect on pipeline strengths and leaks in your Catholic school or system to inform a targeted, responsive pipeline strategy that is more likely to be effective and sustained. I know a great interest of NCA, right, is to give folks, Catholic school educators and leaders, something concrete, something you can actually use in practice. So I'm really happy to share this tool with you all today. And then to consider innovative pipeline strategies through policies and practices from across the US, right, to learn from others through a mission-informed lens, right, very much centering our Catholic education identity, to inform potential implementation and a redesign process in your Catholic school or system. There is no mandate after this that you go and completely redesign your educator pipeline strategies, but I hope that through this presentation you have the encouragement, the opportunity to have some discussions with folks on your leadership teams, whether it be your Catholic schools or your diocesan, archdiocesan office colleagues, about what you're doing around educator pipelines. One, to celebrate the good work that you're already doing, and then to think about how you might make some modifications based on some of the things that you might learn during today's webinar. Want to make some explicit connections to the NESBECs, right? So this work around educator pipelines very much connects to the governance and leadership parts of the NESBECs, right? Specifically thinking about how leaders and leadership teams take responsibility for the development and oversight of personnel, including recruitment, professional growth, faith formation, and so on, right? So recognizing that what we're talking about today does very much connect to our NESBECs work from NCEA. Okay, so an opening Q&A. I want to start by getting some feedback from you all using that Q&A feature that Christy mentioned. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to open up that Q&A, click the little button for Q&A. And in it, if you're a school or system leader, and feel free just to kind of share what you feel comfortable sharing and what makes sense in the Q&A box, but just so that we can kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with in our Catholic schools for those who are on. To respond, feel free to include your name and your position too, if you'd like, or to skip that part. But what I'm asking you to respond to is to share what open positions do you currently have at your school, right? Or if you're a diocesan leader, archdiocesan leader that you're aware of in your diocese or archdiocese. And then also to think back and think, what openings did you have in March, right? So to share now, what openings do you have now? What openings did you have in March? And then if you're feeling really ambitious, I got a second question for you. Where did you post your open positions and why? So I'm going to give about 30 seconds or so for people to be able to respond in the Q&A. But I think this is a nice way to be able to introduce, do a little introduction in this virtual webinar space, and also to give the opportunity for some collaboration and sharing so we can see where we are, where we're coming from. And thank you, as I see folks already responding. Great, thank you, folks. When I've done this presentation for different groups, especially when it's cross schools or cross systems, right, in our Catholic schools, I always want to emphasize one thing, right? It's August. August can be a very stressful time when we think about our talent pipelines, and just to show, right, that oftentimes, yes, there is the emergency, the unexpected vacancy that happens, the really hard to fill position. And that first and foremost, right, like you are not alone in that. I always like to start with that, just that you are not alone in the emergencies and the unfilled positions. It's something that we all are navigating in our Catholic schools, even in August as we get started. But thank you. Thank you for sharing. And hopefully this is a good opportunity for you all to get a sense of who's here in our virtual space and to see some ways that folks are posting their positions, right, as a way of kind of collective learning. Feel free to keep dropping those in. I am going to move along though, but I hope you have an opportunity to read through those. Okay. What I wanted to share is that I actually did a poll back at NCA when I presented in April at convention. And I did this Whova poll before my session started. And I asked folks, where do you share job postings for your Catholic school or diocese, right? So this is a relatively small sample, given the number of folks who completed it, but somewhat of I like to consider a national representation, right? This was at convention. And what folks shared, and I encourage you to compare this with your own response or what you're seeing in the Q&A. When I asked, where do you share job postings for your Catholic school or diocese? There were 9, and people could choose more than one or add more than one. 9 people said the diocesan website. That was the most frequently selected option. 5 said Indeed. 4 said SchoolSpring, right? Indeed and SchoolSpring, kind of popular nonprofit education job posting sites. 3 said on their school website. 2 said sharing it with universities or other higher ed partners. And 2 said on Facebook or social media. And what came out in that conversation was LinkedIn, right? But being a particularly popular one. So something, again, a comparison point for you as you're thinking about where you're sharing your postings currently and where you're seeing other folks share in the Q&A. Okay. A little bit of table setting as well. So I'm pulling from the NCEA data, right? The annual statistical report on schools enrollment and staffing, just to give us a sense of where we're at with some of our pipelines numbers in our Catholic schools, okay? So from that report, right, an important data point is that Catholic schools report an 88% retention rate for teachers. I'm actually going to start with retention. 88% retention rate for teachers. Down at the bottom, right, you'll see that principals are at 81.1%. Right? So lower than teachers, and then superintendents even lower, 73.4%. So there's some starting baseline retention numbers. I also want us to think about representation, about student representation, and then how our educators match or don't match, right, our students in our Catholic schools. And I'm going to do this by, yes, some numbers provided by NCEA, but then also some research that we've done here at Boston College and the Roche Center. So from the NCEA report, right, 19% of Catholic school students across the country identify as Hispanic or Latino, but approximately 9% of Catholic school educators are Hispanic, right? And that 1 in 5, nearly 1 in 5 represents that 19% Catholic school students, right? So 19% of Catholic school students identify as Hispanic Latino, approximately 9% of Catholic school educators are Hispanic, just to be thinking about that as a data point. And this work, I mentioned, right, for me, the interest came when I was back at the Rhode Island Department of Education, but I joined the Roche Center team about 3 years ago. And at that time, I joined at a fantastic time to be at the Roche Center because there was this existing research project led by our Roche Center Executive Director, Dr. Melody Wittenbach, in partnership with Dr. Hassan Espino of the Clough School of Theology and Ministry here at BC, with existing team members, John Reyes and Elena Sada, Dr. John Reyes and Dr. Elena Sada. And I was able to join and be a part of this team and of this study at kind of the later end of it. And so it was great to see this report, Cultivating Talent, a summary report of findings from the national study examining pathways to increase the presence of Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools, which then also led to a special issue in the Journal of Catholic Education on Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools. If you haven't seen these yet, I have links to them in a shared folder that you'll get. That will provide a lot of opportunities for further reading on this topic should you be interested. But I want to give this nod to my team, to my colleagues, and felt really privileged to be a part of this because it was great to see that when I joined, this work was already underway. They saw the importance of thinking about recruitment and retention, and specifically, right, thinking about our Hispanic teachers and leaders, right, given that mismatch of identities of students who are in our Catholic schools and our educators and leaders. So that's where I kind of first got into this educator pipelines topic at BC, at the Roche Center, and back in Catholic education. And from there, I was very proud to be a part of that team. That work is fantastic, impactful work. There's been work or presentations on that at NCEA from team members. But I really wanted to dive into this conversation more and in a broader way, right? So thinking about, okay, there's this great report thinking about Hispanic teachers and leaders in our Catholic schools. What are some implications for educator pipelines more broadly that we can draw from this report and then go further and deeper into it, right? So some things that I've been looking into and thinking about beyond that, and I have to credit, again, with my team, I think also doing this work and trying to build from the work of that report, is to understand that we need an ongoing understanding of the complexity of educator pipelines. That it is not just a simple issue. Even today, right, we're here for about an hour together. We're just going to be scratching the surface, okay? These are deeply complex issues that are important to engage with, but not something that we're going to solve in an hour time. That's important, especially for us in Catholic schools, to take a mission-informed, research-informed, data-informed approach to the work. that it's critical for us, though we are in Catholic education, to learn from others. And that means one, from our Catholic education partners across the country, but also those outside of Catholic education, right, from other education sectors, because there's a lot that we can be learning. And there are a lot of factors in those sectors that impact our work in Catholic education that we need to be mindful of and strategize around. And then finally, right, to think about what that initial report did, Cultivating Talent, and then how can this address recruitment and retention issues for all Catholic school leaders more broadly in this work. And that's where we are today. So first, I just want to define the educator pipeline. And the educator pipeline is defined in a whole host of ways, right, and in a multitude of ways. This is one kind of graphic that I like from EdPost that I think simplifies it nicely. It doesn't capture every single point, but I think it does a nice job, and of course has the little pipe image going across there too, right? So thinking about the pipeline, it is one critical that we think about this in a holistic manner, right, along kind of a continuum. And that starts with preparation, right? How are teachers being formed and prepared for teaching? Then what's the recruitment process? You don't see recruitment here named explicitly, but that's obviously a part of it between preparation and hiring. And then there's the hiring point, right? So you're recruiting and then the hiring process and placing teachers in schools. And then supporting people as they're getting started. Induction as teachers are first getting started, and then ultimately broader retention, right? Because our goal is to be able to retain teachers over a period of time. And in Catholic schools, obviously, right, we talk about Catholic teaching, and we talk about Catholic teachers and educators and leaders, not merely as talent, not merely as cogs in a machine, but we talk about it as a vocation. And I think that's really critical too, right? To recognize that we all feel this vocation to teach in our Catholic schools, to serve this mission of Catholic education and of the church more broadly, and to not merely think about it in these very kind of technical, impersonal ways of thinking about talent and pipelines. Okay. I also think it's important to think about, right, when we use this metaphor of a pipeline, that oftentimes, right, the goal is, okay, we don't want any leaks in our pipelines. We want something that is leak proof. I was on Amazon. I found this hose that claimed to be leak proof, right? Flexible, leak proof. It's going to be great. 4.2 stars. But inevitably, right, if you dig enough on Amazon or any other platform, you're going to find some negative reviews. So sure, right, garden hose but it doesn't actually last. It doesn't actually last. Buy another hose, not worth buying. Cheap plastic connectors, don't recommend it. It's already leaking several sections, only 3 months old. Do not purchase, okay? Because I think it's important to realize that, right, as much as you can strategize around a pipeline, leaks may still occur, right? As much as you can be planful about a well-designed pipe or hose, there are still going to be leaks. This is from an NCAA blog that I wrote last month that was on the NCAA website, kind of leading up to this webinar. But I was thinking about this last sentence as I was putting the finishing touches on this webinar presentation, right? However, the best way to avoid a leak is to ensure that strong, reliable materials are used and that the design of the pipe is built in such a way to proactively avoid potential pitfalls, okay? You are going to have leaks. You're going to have those sudden August vacancies, the email or the call that someone's leaving unexpectedly, the moment of crisis. What do I do? You've got to have a teacher there in front of the kids. It's critical when you're thinking about your mission. You're going to have those moments of crisis. But the more that you proactively plan for and think about your pipelines in a holistic way, the better you're going to be able to respond to that. Okay. So today we're really going to focus on the educator pipelines in two main areas, recruitment and retention. And with retention in particular, we're going to be talking about school culture. And the reason for that, it's going to come at the end, but the reason why we're going to focus on school culture is because it has a huge impact on all that we do when we're talking about talent and pipelines. I'm sure you know, right, by being in our schools, sometimes we walk into a Catholic school and you can feel the joy. You can feel the joy from students. You can feel it from educators. You walk into the faculty room, the faculty lounge, you see people, sharing about their families and about the joys that they're experiencing day in, day out. Now, it doesn't mean everything's sunshine and roses, right? There are still challenges that people have to work through, but the culture is one of joy. And sometimes, unfortunately, we're in schools where that isn't the case, right? You walk into a Catholic school lounge, a teacher's room, and it's just very negative, right? Either teachers aren't sharing, aren't talking, or if they do, it's gossiping, it's talking negatively about students, about parents or families. That's something that we feel. And think about it, right? If you're a prospective teacher, walking in, interviewing at a school, you're going to encounter a school culture. So I always want to leave with this idea of school culture matters across the pipeline because it is something that we feel, it is something that we create and that we support, that we cultivate, and we have to be mindful of that and how it impacts all of these points along the pipeline. Okay. Want to start with a framework too of thinking about pipelines. This is from Edwards et al. It's a talent, labor, and markets framework. And what I love about it is that it's the state of Tennessee, right? Now, there are a lot of frameworks that you see, conceptual frameworks and educational research. Usually you don't see one in the shape of a state. I appreciated this. I appreciated that they went with Tennessee. Now, obviously, a lot of the research draws from Tennessee. So that's the rationale why. But they say that when you're talking about pipelines, you're talking about talent factors, you need to consider it at these different levels, okay? And the kind of top, the highest, broadest level is the state level. And this is talking primarily about public schools, but there's going to be implications for us in Catholic education. At the state level, there are these questions of what are the barriers to entry. The state level, this is thinking about certification requirements, tests that have to be taken, right? Those kinds of requirements at the state that may be preventing teachers from teaching in our schools. The region level, right? Geographic preferences. I love the statistic. It's commonly cited, but I think it's an important one to recognize that 85% of teachers, right, live within 40 miles of where they grew up. I'll say it again. 85% of teachers live within 40 miles of where they grew up. So we know that geography matters. And that doesn't mean, right, that folks who move away or in a program where they're teaching it somewhere new won't necessarily stay. But the data are important for us to be aware of, that geography does matter when we're talking about talent, recruitment, and retention. At the district level, there's this point about compensation, right? So, okay, there's one district and there's another neighboring district. Well, what's the compensation comparison, right? What are the difference in salary and benefits and some of those really critical things that people are thinking about? Not the only things that drive where people teach, right? We do know that folks choose to teach in schools or in districts for reasons beyond compensation, salary, benefits, et cetera. But realistically, compensation is a driving factor. And then the school level, right, this is where we get to those school culture pieces. What are the preferences for working conditions, right? Are teachers able to step out and go to the bathroom when they need to? If another teacher's out that day, are they losing all their prep time because they're covering? Or is there a substitute teacher or someone else there from the school leadership team who's covering so that way they don't lose all of their prep time? And what are those attrition rates at the local level? Again, I really like thinking about this multi-leveled approach to thinking about talent, labor, and markets here via the state of Tennessee and through our public schools. But you'll see it was part of my inspiration in putting together our diagnostics tool a little bit. But I wanted to start with a little bit more of this table setting with this framework. Okay, so then what are we going to do today, right? The four main things we're going to be talking about is one, that's critical to know your data, right? Whether you're a Catholic school or a Catholic school system, a diocese, archdiocese, network, et cetera, you need to know your data about the patterns and the outliers. And three main areas, right? As you know your own data, you also need to have an awareness of what's happening across your sectors, right? So what's happening in your nearby public schools, private, independent, et cetera, because that's going to impact the talent environment that you are in. It's also important to think about shortage areas, right? So shortage areas for you and your school to know what they are, what are the hard to fill positions, and how does that compare with shortage areas more broadly, again, across sectors. Temporal dynamics is thinking about timing, right? So the timing of when you're getting postings up and how that impacts the broader search hiring process. We'll talk a little bit about recruitment. Specifically within recruitment, I want to talk about job postings, how we're posting and where we're going to post, where we're kind of trying to seek out potential educators, prospective educators for our Catholic schools. And then an idea called parochialism. This came from a research article that talks about the social capital that we have. This was, again, from a public school article, but I think not only that it's parochial, right? Obviously a parochial connection to us in Catholic education, but I think this idea of social capital in our Catholic schools is a really important factor for us to be considering. We'll get the introduction to the diagnostic tool, which I think is a great way for you to be able to lead reflections and discussions with your school or system leadership teams on this topic. And again, always want to come from a stance of humility, not right that you and your colleagues are not doing this work already, but to think about what are we doing, what's going well, where do we need to tweak, and what can we do to take a mission-informed, data-informed, research-informed approach to this work. And then finally, a little bit of time thinking about retention, right? How can we be intentional, responsive, and personalized when we think about educator retention in our Catholic schools? And then how can we really be thinking about that school culture? So that's what we'll be walking through. Okay. As we think about this know your data piece, right? A starting point, even when hiring with our Catholic mission and identity in mind, many of our applicants or candidates are likely looking for positions at other schools, public, private, or independent. I think that's a really important thing just to name and to acknowledge, right? Even though we're hiring for mission, we know we're looking for someone who'd be a good fit in our Catholic schools. Oftentimes, those folks who are interested in Catholic schools, right, who have that mission commitment, are still looking at other school options, right? Not everyone, but a lot of them. That's just important for us to be aware of. And I think that drives, part of the conversation about where we're looking, how we're posting, and just being mindful of what's going on more broadly out there as folks are looking at where they want to be teaching. I also think it's important to be thinking about that representation piece that I mentioned earlier, right? So this is from our Cultivating Talent report with Espino and Wittenbach back in 2022. But thinking about, right, what Hispanic teacher representation looks like across sectors. So charter schools actually are leading the way, right, from the data. 16% of teachers in charter schools identify as Hispanic. Traditional and Catholic schools at 9%. So interesting, right, that there's that comparison, that similarity with public schools for us in Catholic education, but also, right, mindful of the mismatch, because while there's a student mismatch for us in Catholic schools, there's very much also a mismatch in charter schools and traditional public schools, and all sectors are working to increase the representation of Hispanic teachers, Hispanic Latino teachers in their schools and systems. So that impacts us, right? If everyone's seeking out certain candidates, then just thinking about supply and demand, there's going to be a certain just reality there that people are going to be looking, or people are going to be sought after. And then what does that mean for us as we're posting and recruiting folks to come and teach in our Catholic schools? Okay. This is one thing, thinking about our recruitment data, right? This is a figure from the state of Tennessee of school district perceived staffing challenges by subject, right? So this is school districts personnel perceiving staffing challenges. And this is important for just recognizing what folks are perceiving, are seeing as shortage areas, right? So too few applicants is red. You'll see that red is 79, right? Very high in math. Next, foreign language, special education, whereas the lower ones are physical education, right? And social studies, elementary. So the idea that how people are perceiving the shortages is this continuum here, is this range here? Why does that matter? People are going to be responding or searching for folks in ways that kind of correlate with this. If someone is looking for a math teacher and they think, oh, there are never enough applicants in math, right, that's going to inform their approach. If someone says, oh, I can get a social studies teacher anywhere, that's going to inform their approach. This is public school data, which again then, right, informs what we're seeing in our Catholic schools, or just the pool more broadly as we're looking for talent. This is another graphic from another article, James et al. From 2023, specifically looking at Boston public schools. That's BPS there, right? So BPS data. And this is looking very concretely at the number of open positions. So not perceptions of open positions, not perceptions of what's hard to staff, but the actual number of open positions. And in BPS, right, we see that the number of open positions very high in special education and elementary. Interestingly, right, and obviously these are different contexts, BPS versus Tennessee, but I think a lot of people would say, you would expect to see math all the way at the highest. Here, math kind of falls in the middle. So it's interesting to see how we perceive shortages versus what the actual shortages are, and why it's so important for us to be considering our data, knowing our data about what are hard to fill positions in our Catholic schools. Also then, right, the ratio of applications to open positions. So if you go back, right, elementary, tons of open positions, but look at the ratio of applications. Many more applications coming in for elementary compared to some other areas, such as science, which we know is also another kind of harder fill position. But again, the takeaway from looking at some of these data is, one, to know your own data, so that way you can see, are these merely my perceptions, my assumptions, or what are my actual hard to fill positions over time? And then again, how does that inform my strategy? The temporal dynamics piece I love, right? Thinking about the timing. This is, again, looking at BPS data. So one thing too, right, at Boston Public Schools, everything's kind of forward a little bit, right? BPS doesn't go back to school until after Labor Day, after 9/1. So obviously, depending on where you are in the country and your school start date, you're going to want to kick this back a couple weeks to a month. So just thinking about the density of applications and how, right, when you're posting, trying to get a posting up early, if you can, if you know that something's coming, an early retirement, a teacher may have to be let go, thinking about when you're getting that posting up is going to be critical because, right, you're seeing a peak right around May 1st, right, with an already strong showing back on March 1st. And then a gradual decline from there where there are fewer applications coming in as people are getting solidified in roles elsewhere. Again, this is public school data, but something that I would really encourage you to track as a Catholic school or system to think about, like, what are those temporal, what are those timing dynamics for you as you're seeing openings come up, as you're seeing applications come in, and what does that look like across content areas, right? Having those data are going to be really helpful in informing your strategy. Okay. So that's, again, just talking about knowing your data. That's one critical piece. The next piece is thinking about job postings. And the first thing I wanted to start with is actually, right, it's not just about where you put the job posting, right, in terms of LinkedIn or School Spring or the parish bulletin, that there is real value in encouragement and invitation, which is such a, just a critical value for us, something that's so critical for us in the gospel and our Catholic identity, our Catholic mission, this idea of being invitational. We did this question in the survey for Cultivating Talent, the report that I mentioned earlier, right, for Hispanic teachers and leaders, Spino, Wittenbach, who encourage you to be an educator. And you see the number of folks who cite family members, teachers, friends, principals, pastors as people who encourage them to pursue opportunities in Catholic education. Now, I think, right, we'd all like to see these numbers be higher, especially for some of the categories. But nevertheless, right, we see that encouragement plays a critical role. There's a quote here, right? My kids went to Catholic school. It was a tiny school, and they needed help. So I volunteered to help. I was hooked immediately. It was that moment for me. I changed it up a bit. Right there, a substitute teacher in the 5th grade, delivering a lesson plan. Students weren't quite getting it, changed it up a bit. The students got it. It was that moment for them, right? Being able to see the students have that aha moment. They wanted to be a teacher, started going to college fairly shortly after that and got my degree. But it was this idea of being a volunteer, right? Kind of saying yes, being encouraged, having that moment in the classroom that then led them to actually staying in Catholic education. So aside from just the importance of encouragement and being invitational to folks, right, through the various ways that we are connected to folks in our Catholic schools, our parishes, etc., I think it's important for us, again, to look around and see what other kind of pathways are out there for folks to get into education. This is just a smattering of them. There are TA, right, teaching assistant to BA, bachelor's degrees programs. That's the Educator pathway program in the upper left. There are early childhood educator scholarships, right, for those who want to teach in early childhood, given the shortage there. We at BC, right, at the Roche Center with the Lynch School, we have our Catholic leadership cohort as an opportunity to prepare and form current and aspiring Catholic school principals. There's a principal residency network. This is out of Rhode Island. I live down in Providence, so wanted to throw in some Rhode Island examples. The principal residency network, which trains and forms principals for those in residence, right, for those who are already sitting principals in public, charter, and Catholic school settings. There are all the CHESS partners, right, through NCA, all the Catholic higher ed partners, such as Boston College, that have a leadership formation and preparation opportunities. There's the UCC more broadly, right? Folks are probably familiar with programs like UCTC, the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps here at Boston College, or ACE, the Alliance for Catholic Education out of the University of Notre Dame. There's a whole host of these programs that help to form and prepare beginning Catholic school teachers and then have them placed in partner schools and dioceses throughout the country. And so these are all different ways that you can kind of be tapping into talent pipelines. But the other one that I wanted to mention is this ILSR, because I think this is one that we don't think about a lot. This is, again, out of Rhode Island, and there are similar institutions in every state, Institute for Labor Studies and Research. And the thing that's unique about ILSR is that they have a teacher assistant training program, okay? This is a training program for teacher assistants in public schools primarily, right? This is approved by the Rhode Island Department of Education. It provides training for folks who want to go and be a TA. And TAs, right, or paraprofessionals are not the teacher of record in classes, but they're providing a lot of important support for students. They're getting valuable experience working with students and being familiar with the curriculum, with instructional practices, with classroom behavior, et cetera. and really growing in these, and they're getting the training for it through these TA training programs. And what I saw from my time at RIDE with the Department of Education is that a lot of folks in these TA training programs are actually folks from other countries who come to the US, who have a strong educational background, who have educational experience, but cannot get certified because their credentials don't transfer from their home country to the United States. And I think this is a really great opportunity for us in Catholic education, because I think that many folks, who may be coming from other countries, may be Catholic, they may not be, but perhaps they are Catholic, or perhaps they're interested in teaching in a Catholic school. And because they can't gain access to public schools, public education, there's a real opportunity for us as Catholic schools to reach out to them and to say, are you interested in being in a Catholic school? Are you Catholic? Are you committed to the mission of Catholic education? And to welcome folks into some of our Catholic schools for teaching opportunities, specifically in hard to fill areas. And this can be a relatively simple outreach, right? Every single state has teacher assistant, TA, or paraprofessional training programs where folks might have these credentials but are not able to be the teacher of record. And as opposed to just to being the TA, they can actually come and be teachers of record, right, in our Catholic schools. Now, some Catholic schools, right, depending on your diocesan requirements, state requirements, may require folks to be certified. So then you can think about, right, pathways to certification for them in our Catholic schools if you have the means to do that. But I think that, thinking about folks coming from countries outside of the United States with educational backgrounds, or folks who are in these TA training programs have a clear interest in teaching, this is another way that we can tap into existing kind of those pipes, those pipes into a broader pool for folks to consider how they might want to be teaching in our Catholic schools. And some of you may be saying, okay, that's really interesting. Like, you're proposing get or recruiting from teaching assistants. Is that going to be, folks who are not going to be as well qualified, who are not going to do as good of a job in our Catholic schools? And a report, this actually just came out, over the summer from the Annenberg Institute at Brown University. There was a research report by Mary Lasky at Harvard University, Dr. Lasky, called Teachers in Our Midst, Using Experienced School Staff to Solve Teacher Shortages. And what they found is that folks who are teaching assistants or paraprofessionals often are performing at the same quality of teaching as experienced teachers. Now, a couple things here, right? This is not meant to deprofessionalize teachers more broadly, but it's to assert that folks who are going through teacher assistant training, or who are spending hours in the classroom as a teacher assistant, or in other settings, right? Like in countries outside of the United States before coming here to the US, they have valuable experience and expertise and have a lot to be able to give through teaching. And for those, like I said, who are Catholic, who may want to be teaching in a Catholic school, who see themselves as aligned with Catholic school mission, this is a real opportunity for us to connect to folks who want to be teachers of record. So this is an idea of when I put it out to folks in Catholic education, they're usually like, I never necessarily thought of that. And some of you may also have, I think I saw in the Q&A, teaching assistants yourselves in your schools. And something that I'd ask you to consider too, right, is that if someone's expressing that interest as a TA, and that perhaps they have a background or desire to serve in a capacity or in a function for a role that is oftentimes seen as a shortage area, you can be thinking about how can we continue to support this person, right? So that way they can grow from this TA position to become a teacher of record in our Catholic school when they already are so committed to our Catholic school mission and identity and our students. Okay. And then also too, right, I wanted to highlight not just our public counterparts and some things that we can learn from there, but also things that are happening in our Catholic schools. So as we think about, TA programs, TA to BA, getting folks bachelor's degrees, which gives them, the opportunity to get a needed credential to teach in our Catholic schools. From our Cultivating Talent report, we named the Archdiocese of Philadelphia that had a Catholic residency program as a real promising practice, where we saw the Archdiocese of Philadelphia partnering with a local Catholic university, Immaculata University, to offer a cost-effective pathway to preparation and formation to teach in Catholic schools, right? So they're getting the kind of formal higher ed preparation, but then also receiving training and coaching in the classroom, that induction process as well. So it's not merely just getting the coursework, it's also getting that practical support in their classroom through this program. And we found that was a really innovative program, something that was worth naming and encouraging for folks to think about, are we doing that right now, perhaps with a local Catholic higher ed partner? Is there the opportunity for us to do something like this in partnership with a local higher ed partner? So wanted to give that shout out too, right? That we're not just learning from some of the things that we're seeing in public education, but some of these innovations are very much happening in our Catholic schools as well. So a few kind of takeaways as we think about job postings, right? I like to say post early and often, right? Post early and often when we're posting positions, remember those temporal dynamics. We want to get those postings up early. If possible, right? Post at the system or network level. It can go a long way if you're a diocese and archdiocese, and you know, again, from your data that every year you have a fifth grade opening, to post those positions at the diocesan level and then to push them out to various entities, such as some of the things that we'll review below, to do that early so that you are building up a pool of potential applicants and to get that started as early as possible during the year, because inevitably, right, like you know that you're going to have or will likely have those openings. The idea of having web-based postings, right? So having your postings online and then to share them via social media. As you saw from some of our NCAA colleagues, some said that they share via SchoolSpring or Indeed. Those are fine places to post. LinkedIn is a very popular place to post these days. A lot of folks who are doing work of both sharing postings and searching for job postings, they're in that space. And with an algorithm that oftentimes will, bring a relevant post for someone's background to their feeds, so that way they can see that. So I would encourage you to think about some of those means of posting if you haven't already. And then go back to that idea of encouragement and invitation, right? Think about some of our Catholic partners as Catholic schools. How are we sharing postings in our parishes? How are we sharing with our school families, right? Maybe there's a mom, a dad, an aunt or uncle, right? Someone who's affiliated with the school, with a Catholic school student who has a passion for education, but hasn't necessarily had that invitation to consider teaching. How can we get the invitation out to them in a more intentional, concrete way? And other organizations, other community organizations, Catholic organizations in particular, where there might be folks interested, but just need that encouragement, need that invitation. Just like with the Archdiocese of Philadelphia example, to think about how we're partnering with higher education and our community partners, how we can do that in a more intentional way. And then again, TAs, right? How can we think about TAs potentially in our Catholic schools if they exist, or in that broader TA pool, especially in public education? How can we tap into that? Similarly with substitute teachers, right? If we have substitute teachers in our Catholic schools, how can they be a potential pipeline for Catholic school educators? And with volunteers, the same thing, right? We go back to that one encouragement narrative of someone who started off as a volunteer, had that aha moment of teaching and learning with students, and boom, was hooked and stayed in our Catholic schools. So how can we do that in more of an intentional, systematic way? And then this last piece on recruitment is on this idea of parochialism. Right, as I mentioned, this is from a Noonan and Bristol article, a research article, but I think there's deep relevance for us in our Catholic schools, even though this is set in public education, because what they really found, right, is that in this public school and in this town, there was social capital, but there was social capital particularly for those school leaders who were of a particular identity. And in this place, right, it was a predominantly white school and community. And so it was creating a homogenous workforce because folks, were connected to and were networking with folks who looked like them, from the same background, from the same town, et cetera. And as student demographics, right, family demographics changed, the educator workforce was not keeping up, right, and it impacted hiring more diversely, et cetera. So I think there's a real way to inform what we're doing in our Catholic schools too, right? That if we think about our current networks in our Catholic schools or our parishes, and we're seeing a shift in student demographics, right? We go back to that earlier number about Hispanic students and how Hispanic educators and leaders, that number is not corresponding. How can we be breaking out of this parochial structure to be thinking about how we are welcoming, encouraging, intentionally forming Hispanic educators more intentionally, and not just Hispanic educators, right? But folks from other identifying backgrounds, other races, other cultural backgrounds, languages, et cetera, genders, et cetera, right? Just so that way we're not so set on what may be viewed as the norm for what a teacher is in a given space. I think in our elementary schools too, I just mentioned gender, how often our Catholic elementary schools are predominantly staffed by women. And this is not to say that women are not doing a great job. They're doing a fantastic job in our Catholic schools. But how can we perhaps be more invitational to men to teach in our elementary schools? Similarly, sometimes there can be the assumption, right, that high school math and science is predominantly taught by men in our Catholic schools. How can we make sure that our female students in high school are seeing female science and STEM teachers, right? Thinking about those mismatches along along gender as well. And then I think another important thing that they name in this article is alumni. And I think this has a real critical place for us in our Catholic schools. We are very proud of alumni from our Catholic schools, but when we're thinking about those then who are coming back to teach or to be in leadership roles, we want to be mindful of that, right? Like it shouldn't just be alumni who are in our teaching roles or in our leadership roles. So to have some deep reflection around what's the right balance of alumni in our schools. How do we want to think about through our social network, through our social capital, who we want to be invitational or encouraging towards, and what's that right balance of alumni versus non-alumni, because our students are also going to see this, right? If students are only seeing alumni, students who were at the school, 10, 20, et cetera, years ago, is that necessarily representative of the student body today? And how can we be reflective of that? Okay. So now I want to transition to our diagnostic tool, right? And I think this is a very kind of concrete way to be thinking about this. As I show a couple slide images from the tool, I would just encourage you to be thinking about, what resonates, what questions or issues are you already addressing in your school or your diocese? What questions or issues do you perhaps need to address? And how can you use a tool like this to reflect on your pipeline leaks and recruitment strategy? Also say too, I think Christy has a link to that shared Google Drive where the diagnostic tool in a PDF form, there's a PDF of the slide deck as well, and then a bunch of readings and resources are all located. So Christy, if you can just drop that in the chat for folks, feel free to be able to follow along. But I just want to walk us through this tool so you see what you have access to. And again, the idea being, right, that using this diagnostic tool is not going to solve all of your educator pipelines questions or issues in your Catholic school or system. But I think that this could be a really valuable tool for personal reflection, for leadership team reflection, and for discussion to think about how we're considering all these factors that I've been discussing so far in this webinar. Okay, that's what you'll see when you first pull it up. And again, remember that the Tennessee framework, right? Broken down in different levels. So that's how I organized this, and then obviously interpreted it through a Catholic mission, a Catholic mission lens. So at the national level, right, thinking about attitudes towards teaching, desirability as a profession, as a vocation, with some guiding questions. And I want to jump to number 1 and 2 here, right? What do our school community members believe about teaching in a Catholic school? Is teaching in a Catholic school desirable? Why or why not? These may seem like really high-level questions, but I think these are really important for school and system leaders to grapple with and to consider, because if the answer is, knowing kind of our pool and what we're hearing from folks in the community or in our parishes, and they're saying, it's not really seen as valuable to teach in a Catholic school right now, then we need to address those narratives, and we need to think about how we change those narratives. At the state level, right, you remember barriers to entry. And so some guiding questions here, right? Do our teachers in our diocese and in our school, do they have to be certified or licensed? Do they require a certain number of education credits in the content area? Do they have to pass certain tests? Do they have to be Catholic? And right, the answer here is, or my approach here in posing these questions is not to say that there's a right or wrong answer here, but just that you think critically about like who's setting these policies. One, do they even exist? Do we have an answer to them? Why do they exist? And are they in service to our school and students? Are they actually in service to our mission when we're thinking about these requirements? Okay, so some sample questions there. At the regional level, thinking again about those geographic preferences, our teachers' current perspective from our local community and or parish. What communities and organizations do our teachers belong to? Do we partner with local or regional institutions of higher education, especially those of Catholic affiliation, right? Our CHESS partners through NCEA, to think about an opportunity like what the Archdiocese of Philadelphia did, right? Are we doing that? Are we not doing that? At the district or diocesan level, right, where we talk about compensation, not the only factor, but an important one, a driving factor. What does our compensation package look like at our Catholic school? How does our compensation package compare to other schools like us in the area? And yes, this means neighboring Catholic schools, but also private or independent schools, charter, traditional public schools, because again, it's highly likely that teachers who are looking at your Catholic school, even if driven by mission, that they're also looking elsewhere. Do we have compensation offerings beyond typical salary and benefits, right? Here's some examples of things that you see offered: student tuition remission, higher education tuition remission if they're pursuing additional degrees, professional learning and development, childcare offerings, financial literacy and planning, right? These are some of the things that you see offered, not just in our Catholic ed space, but elsewhere. And do we have compensated teacher leadership opportunities, right? So if you're soliciting help from teachers, kind of elevating them to lead a curriculum review, to lead a retreat, are they compensated for that? And it doesn't have to be some huge sum, but is there a way that teachers are being recognized for that work, perhaps being given a small stipend for that, that says, you're being valued for it, and here's a way that we can recognize that, even if it's a small way. For recruitment, thinking about shortage areas, right? What grade levels or content areas do we consistently staff successfully? What data do we have to support this? Where do we consistently struggle to staff? What data do we have? What data do we need to better assess our shortage area issues and patterns, right? So that's just a critical one of thinking about what data do we have, what data don't we have, what data do we need to have more informed conversations. The temporal dynamics piece, the timing, right? When do we typically post open positions? What factors influence the timing? When do we learn if current teachers intend to stay or leave? When is our applicant pool the largest? When is it the smallest? What data do we have to support that, right? Questions that can be really critical for a school or system team to review, to think about what they already have answered or already have in place, and what they might want to be intentionally modifying or adding to their approach or strategy. For job postings, where do we post or share our open job postings? How do we share them? Do we directly network with folks, right? Who's responsible for posting jobs, for tracking data? What's in our job posting? We haven't talked a lot about that, right? Again, this is a topic, educator pipelines, that contains multitudes, but what is in our job posting? Is it reflective of our school mission and the type of teacher we want in our Catholic school? And then this idea of parochialism, right, that I discussed earlier. How many alumni teach at the school? What's our target number of alumni teaching? How many teachers of color teach at the school? How does this number compare to students of color, right? That racial or identity match or mismatch. Do we have relationships and trust with the communities to which our students and families belong, right? How can we go beyond those established social networks? Helpful questions to consider. And then also, right, in conclusion, mission and identity. How does our Catholic school mission and identity inform our current pipeline strategy, right? And to name that explicitly, what are we doing? What aren't we doing? How should our Catholic mission and identity inform potential changes to our pipeline strategy? And what makes us distinct from other schools, right? Catholic and otherwise. Do we celebrate this? Do we incorporate this into our pipeline process? How do we talk about ourselves in a job posting, through a recruitment process, through a hiring process? That's another really critical thing when we think about bringing people on board, and are they the right fit for us? Do they also follow the mission? Are they aligned with the mission? Do they believe in the mission? What makes us distinct? How do we name and celebrate it? Okay. Briefly, just a few things on retention, right? I want to share a couple examples of what I'm seeing more broadly. A lot of this is at the state or district level, more so in public sector, but not exclusively. And then thinking about how we can do something similar in our Catholic schools. And again, I think a lot of Catholic schools and systems are taking steps, have examples of this, they're taking steps in this direction, they have examples of this. But what I'm finding is that, right, it's really important on retention, not just to be thinking about broad policies of retention, right? And obviously, certain things that can be offered to everyone are fantastic, but I think we need to be thinking about retention in a way that is intentional, responsive, and personalized, right? Thinking about the needs that our folks may have. And some of these are more teaching and learning, right? Thinking about opportunities for professional development to be able to grow in their craft of teaching, perhaps pursuing a degree and providing tuition assistance. But this is what I'm seeing again in the public sector, right? That Connecticut is offering a teacher's mortgage assistance program, that there's teacher loan forgiveness, that there are minority teachers of scholarship programs, right? That there are early childhood educator programs and scholarships. Now, I know, right, that, we are not, obviously, like, Catholic schools are not funded in the same way that public schools are. But as we're talking with folks, as we're considering the landscape, as we're thinking about the talent, there needs to be, again, right, this cross-sector awareness of what's being offered and how perhaps we might be able to offer, something similar if there's the opportunity, right? If there is a way to say, well, we don't necessarily have a teacher loan forgiveness, but if you do want to go on and pursue a master's, this is what we can do to help cover some of those costs, right? So just being mindful of what's out there, what people might be seeing or have as packages from other schools outside of Catholic schools, and then what are we able to offer folks, and doing so in that kind of responsive way based on the needs that we're hearing. Um, Another thing I think is you're seeing more of, the upper left, this is in a public school, right? Montana school solved its teacher shortage by opening a daycare, right? They had a lot of younger, more early career, early transitioning into mid-career teachers who had young kids, and they were really struggling to find childcare. They opened a daycare. Boston College High School, right here in Boston, Jesuit school, has the Eagle's Nest, right? Kind of daycare for teachers and staff members for their kids, right? Who are working at BC High. And there are others examples of this too. I know, I think it's West Catholic out in the Diocese of Grand Rapids, et cetera, are really thinking about daycare in new and innovative ways, and how that can be an offering for folks, and especially for young parents and families as an incentive to stay in our Catholic schools, and to be able to provide that as an opportunity, right? So again, the answer here is not every Catholic school needs to go out and open a daycare in order to retain their teachers. But if you're seeing that as a demonstrated need, from your school community, from your educators, from your leaders, or even regionally, right? If there's a regional need for that, how could we explore a retention option like that, like opening a daycare to be able to support folks? Okay, and then just coming back to culture, when we think about retention, a big piece of culture is simply right that it doesn't happen overnight. It builds and builds and builds by individuals' actions, stances, beliefs, etc. And whether we're thinking about diversifying our teacher and leader identities, right? Thinking about who makes up our educator workforce in our Catholic schools, and if that matches or doesn't match it, our student and family population. And if we're thinking about how we can break down some of these homogenous social capital, establishments in our schools, it's not enough to just say like, hey, we want to recruit more Hispanic teachers, or we want to recruit more Black teachers. We have to think about the culture that's being created. I really appreciate this language from Dr. Bettina Love, saying stop trying to recruit Black teachers until you can retain the ones you have. We need to be thinking about what's going on in our schools, how they're welcoming for folks who might not be, kind of the dominant identity present, and what their experience is in our schools, and whether or not someone actually feel welcome as a member of our school community. This obviously goes for students and families, but has a real implication for folks as educators and school leaders too. And then even generationally, right, just to close, there's this piece, another paper from the Annenberg Institute at Brown University called OK Boomer, Generational Differences in Teacher Quality, and recognizing that, right, there are just differences in approaches to teaching, the experiences and how people saw schools themselves by generations. And that's not to say that one generation is better or worse than the other, but just to be mindful of that and thinking about how we are creating a culture where all educators can feel, authentically themselves, to be able to celebrate that they're made in the image and likeness of God, and coming together to form a special community to continue on an important mission in serving our Catholic education mission and working with students. Okay, so just in close, a couple of reflecting questions. Hearing all this, and I know I threw out, there was a lot thrown at you. Like I said, a complex topic, but wanted to go through some high level things, introduce some concrete examples, provide some research on this, go through the diagnostic tool, which you will have access to. But again, just for you to be thinking about as you're walking away from this webinar, what resonates, what pipeline recruitment strategies are you currently utilizing, right? What's working? What pipeline strategies might you try? Why or why not? And what is unique about your Catholic school that should inform your strategy and approach? Okay, so some questions to guide. I know we're coming up on the hour. I'll give a little bit of time. I can stay on if anyone has any questions. That's also my contact information, oconnooq@bc.edu, if you have further questions or want to connect further on this topic. But thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I will turn it back to Christy to close us out. So thank you all for your time and for your interest in this topic.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connor. In reference to one of your earlier initial slides on retention rates, there was a question about sharing resources that you have for that data. Would you like to address that?
Sure, let me take a look at that. Did you happen to see which one it was? I want to make sure I'm responding to the right one.
I believe it was early on with the retention rates for teachers and leadership, principals and superintendents.
Oh, for in Catholic education. Yeah, so that's from the NCA data. I can actually go back to that real quick just so you can see the reference there. Just have the cover of the year. There we go. Yeah, so this is from the NCEA U.S. Catholic Elementary and Secondary Schools 23-24 Annual Statistical Report on Schools Enrollment and Staffing. So that's from NCEA data that these numbers are provided, except for the one thing to note here, the one that's in kind of the tan highlight, right? The 9% of Catholic school educators are Hispanic, while nearly 1 in 5 Catholic school students in the U.S. are Hispanic. That 9% is from our Cultivating Talent data, right? So we pulled the 9% number from our Cultivating Talent data, matched it with the NCEA data that we found.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. And wow, Dr. O'Connor, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us here today that you have shared a wealth of information and inspiration and innovation here today to address, the recruitment and retention approaches that we need in our Catholic schools. And thank you for the valuable diagnostic tool to help shape our pipelines and make them stronger and as leak-proof as possible. A really valuable tool there. And thank you for giving of your time and talents with us today and for the important work that you do, for guiding us and keeping us mission informed, data informed, and research informed and driven. So thank you very much for your presentation here today.
Thank you, and blessings to you all as you get started in your school years. I know some folks are already underway, and some will be starting in the coming weeks. So know my prayers for you all as you get started on an exciting school year ahead. And to remember, right, that if you're still trying to fill that last position, don't worry. Others are in the same boat. We're in this together, and hopefully some of these strategies might help you in closing that out as you get started for the year ahead.
Perfect, thank you. And to you, our participants, thank you for attending this NCEA Summer 2024 webinar series. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on your feedback. So please help us to make an even bigger difference by using this link in the chat to complete a very brief survey. And if you are interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your email and name at the end of the survey. All certificates are sent via automated email, so check your spam folder if you do not see something in the next few minutes. On behalf of NCEA, thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Thank you to our presenter, Dr. Michael T. O'Connor, and goodbye and God bless.